Okay, so uh, are you ready to dive back into this TikTok craziness?
Oh, absolutely. I think this is the biggest story in tech right now.
It's wild, right? Like just yesterday, the app was gone, vanished from the US, and now it's back.
Poof, and then reappear. It really is like something out of a movie.
And for a lot of people, it wasn't just entertainment, it was their livelihood.
Right. All those creators who'd built their careers on TikTok, suddenly their income stream just dried up overnight.
Not to mention all the businesses who rely on it for marketing and reaching their audience.
It's a massive platform, and its disappearance had huge ripple effects.
It really shows you how powerful these tech companies have become.
And how dependent we are on them. Like it or not, our lives are intertwined with these platforms.
So, okay, let's rewind a bit. The ban was supposed to go into effect, but then suddenly TikTok is back online. What happened?
Well, the timing is incredibly suspicious. Let's just say that.
Suspicious. How so?
Think about it. Tomorrow is President Trump's inauguration.
Sure.
And just a few days ago, there were reports of a secret meeting between TikTok CEO Shou Zichu and President Trump.
Wait, a secret meeting at Mar-a-Lago?
You got it. The details of what went down are still under wraps, but...
Wow, that's like straight out of House of Cards.
Right. And then, boom, TikTok is back online just before Trump takes office again.
So are we suggesting that maybe President Trump had something to do with this? Like he pulled some strings to save TikTok?
It's definitely a possibility. I mean, remember, this is the same President Trump who tried to force a sale of TikTok back in 2020.
Right, he was super vocal about his concerns over TikTok and its ties to China.
Exactly. National security risks, data privacy, the whole 9 yards.
But now it seems like maybe his stance has softened.
Or maybe something else happened behind the scenes. We've heard whispers about potential financial contributions, maybe even to Trump's inaugural fund.
Hold on, are you saying that TikTok might have bought their way out of a ban?
I'm not saying anything for sure, but let's just say it wouldn't be the first time something like this has happened in the world of politics.
Wow, if that's true, that's...
It's a lot to unpack, and it raises a ton of questions about the influence of money and politics, the power of these tech giants.
And what it all means for the future of TikTok and for us, the users.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin to untangle all of this?
I guess we start by looking at the bigger picture. TikTok's story isn't just about viral dances and catchy songs anymore.
Right. It's about the intersection of technology, geopolitics, and power.
And it's a story that's been unfolding for years now.
Mm-hmm.
It all started back in 2016 when TikTok first launched in China.
And it quickly exploded onto the global scene. Millions of users, billions of views.
It was unlike anything we'd seen before in terms of its reach and cultural influence.
But that success also brought scrutiny, especially from the U.S. government.
Concerns about TikTok's parent company ByteDance being based in China.
Fears about data privacy and the potential for the Chinese government to access user information.
Right, and those concerns led to investigations, legal battles, even attempts to ban the app outright.
It's been a roller coaster of political maneuvering and corporate intrigue.
And for the millions of TikTok users in the U.S., it's been a time of uncertainty and anxiety.
Caught in the middle of this geopolitical tug of war.
And then, just when it seemed like the story was over, the Supreme Court upheld the law, the ban deadline was approaching, and
TikTok pulls off this miraculous comeback.
a comeback that just happens to coincide with President Trump's return to power and those rumors of a secret meeting.
It's almost too perfect, isn't it? Like something out of a movie.
It really is.
Yeah.
So what exactly happened in that meeting between TikTok CEO and President Trump?
And what does it mean for the future of TikTok and its relationship with the U.S. government?
Are we just pawns in a bigger game being played by powerful corporations and politicians?
Those are all questions we'll be exploring as we dive deeper into the TikTok saga.
We'll be looking at the arguments for and against ban to potential national security implications,
The wider impact on the digital landscape,
the role of social media in our lives,
the power dynamics at play.
and the importance of digital literacy and critical thinking in navigating this crazy digital world.
So if you're ready to go beyond the headlines and really unpack the complexities of the TikTok story, stay tuned. This is a deep dive you won't want to miss.
It's amazing how TikTok has become this like battleground for all these big issues, right?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it's not just about silly dances anymore. It's about data privacy, freedom of expression.
And for national security.
Exactly. It's become this focal point for so much tension between the U.S. and China.
And the crazy thing is, even before this whole ban situation, experts were already divided on how much of a threat TikTok actually posed.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We actually came across this really interesting research from the Atlantic Council. They're a think tank that's been following this whole TikTok saga really closely.
Oh, yeah, I've seen their stuff. It's good.
So they put together this expert guide with all these different perspectives on the issue, and it's fascinating to see how much disagreement there is.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
So what are some of the key takeaways?
Well, one expert, Emerson Brooking, he argues that if TikTok was actually a tool for Chinese interference, someone forgot to tell China.
Wow, so he's basically saying we're overreacting. Kind of, yeah. Like maybe we're getting all worked up over nothing.
Interesting. So what's his reasoning?
Well, he points out that even though TikTok has this massive reach, there's not much evidence to suggest it's being used for any kind of coordinated propaganda by the Chinese government.
Makes you think.
Right. But then you have another expert, Matt Gerasi, who says even if TikTok isn't actively being used for propaganda, the potential for data misuse is still a huge concern.
Oh, yeah, that's a valid point. I mean, they do collect a ton of data on their users.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Gerasi argues that our current data privacy laws just aren't strong enough to address those risks, especially when you consider that under Chinese law, ByteDance could be forced to hand over that data to the government.
That's a scary thought.
Right. But the interesting thing is, Gerasi doesn't actually think a ban is the right solution.
Oh, really? So what does he propose?
He believes that instead of outright bans, we need to focus on creating stronger data privacy regulations that apply to all tech companies, regardless of where they're based.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's not like American tech companies have a perfect track record when it comes to data privacy.
Exactly. We've seen so many scandals with companies like Facebook and Google collecting and misusing user data.
Ugh, don't even get me started on that.
Right. And that's why Gerasi argues that a ban could actually be counterproductive. It could lead to a more fragmented internet where countries start blocking each other's apps and online services.
Like a digital Cold War almost.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that another expert, Konstantinos Kamaitis, is really worried about. He says a ban would be a direct attack on the open and global internet.
Which could have huge consequences for the free flow of information and ideas.
Right. And then there's Samantha Wong, who brings up the economic impact.
Mm.
A ban could actually harm American businesses and consumers who rely on TikTok.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, think about all the creators who make a living from TikTok. A ban would completely wipe out their income.
And businesses that use TikTok for advertising would have to scramble to find new ways to reach their customers.
It's a whole ecosystem that would be disrupted.
And let's not forget the cultural impact. TikTok has become this global hub for creativity and expression. A ban would silence the voices of millions of users.
It's like this giant knot. Every time you try to untangle one part, you end up tightening another.
Exactly. It's such a complex issue with so many different factors to consider.
But one thing's for sure, the stakes are incredibly high. This isn't just about one app, it's about the future of the internet, the balance of power between nations, and the role of technology in our lives.
Okay, so we've established that this is a really messy situation with no easy answers. But let's bring it back to the present moment. TikTok is back online, but for how long?
That's the million-dollar question, right? We know there was that secret meeting between TikTok CEO and President Trump, but the details are still a mystery.
And the timing is just so incredibly suspicious. Yeah, right before the inauguration.
It's hard not to connect the dots.
So what exactly happened in that meeting? Did TikTok agree to some kind of concessions, maybe stricter data security measures or more U.S. government oversight?
Or was it something more under the table? Were there promises of financial contributions or political favors exchanged?
We may never know for sure. But one thing is clear. TikTok's fate is now in the hands of President Trump. So let's play out some scenarios. What's the best case scenario for TikTok?
Well, the best case would be for President Trump to just completely drop the ban. Maybe he was convinced by TikTok's CEO during that meeting, or maybe he's realized that a ban would be more trouble than it's worth.
So TikTok gets a free pass, and they can continue operating in the U.S. as usual.
Well, not exactly. Even if the ban is dropped, they'll likely still face a lot of scrutiny from Congress.
Right. Congress is still pretty concerned about those security risks.
Exactly. So even in the best case scenario, TikTok's future in the U.S. is still uncertain.
Okay, what about a more middle ground scenario?
Well, maybe President Trump agrees to some kind of compromise. He could allow TikTok to continue operating, but with certain conditions.
Like what kind of conditions?
He could demand that ByteDance sell a majority stake to an American company, so the U.S. would have more control over the app and its data.
Okay, that makes sense.
He could also insist on stricter data security measures, independent audits, and maybe even limitations on what kind of content can be shared on the platform.
So TikTok would become this kind of hybrid entity with Chinese ownership, but American oversight.
Exactly. It could be a way for both sides to save face.
But wouldn't that raise some serious concerns about censorship and government interference?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any kind of government oversight or content restrictions would be a huge First Amendment issue.
Okay, so a compromise is possible, but it's definitely not without its challenges. What about the worst-case scenario? What if President Trump decides to go ahead with the ban?
Well, if that happens, he has a few options. He could issue new executive orders targeting ByteDance's assets in the U.S. or prohibiting American companies from doing business with TikTok.
Wow, that would be a pretty aggressive move.
It would. And he could also pressure Apple and Google to remove the app from their app stores, which would essentially cut off TikTok's access to new users.
That would be a major blow.
For sure. Of course, there would be legal challenges, and it would probably end up in a long court battle. But President Trump has shown that he's not afraid to push the limits of his power.
So even though TikTok is back online for now, its future is still hanging in the balance.
Absolutely. And the outcome of this whole saga will have huge implications, not just for TikTok, but for the future of the internet, the relationship between the U.S. and China, and the role of technology in our lives.
It's a lot to think about, and it's honestly pretty scary to think about how much power these tech companies and governments have over our digital lives.
I know. It's a lot to process. But one thing's for sure, this story is far from over. We'll have to wait and see what happens next.
I mean, it's crazy to think how quickly everything changed, right?
Yeah.
One day you're watching TikToks, and the next it's like, poof, gone.
It's like the digital world can shift on a dime, and yeah, it can be pretty unsettling.
Especially when you think about how much we rely on these platforms.
Not just entertainment anymore, right? It's how we connect with people, build businesses, even express ourselves.
And this whole TikTok situation really highlights how vulnerable we are to these sudden changes.
Totally. We've built so much of our lives on these platforms, and it can all disappear overnight.
So what's the takeaway here? I mean, what can we learn from all of this?
I think it's a wake-up call. A reminder that even though the internet feels like this free and open space,
There are still a lot of powerful forces at play.
exactly. Governments, corporations, they all have a huge influence on our digital lives.
And our data is valuable. It's a commodity that's being bought and sold and monitored.
And sometimes manipulated.
Yeah.
So we need to be more aware of what's happening behind the scenes.
So what can we do about it? I mean, it feels like we're just stuck in this system.
Well, awareness is the first step, right?
Yeah.
Once you understand the problem, you can start to look for solutions.
Okay, but what kind of solutions are we talking about?
Well, for starters, we can be more careful about the information we share online and the apps we use.
Right, like reading those privacy policies, which no one ever does.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But seriously, those policies tell you how your data is being collected and used.
And we should be more mindful of the permissions we grant apps, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And whenever possible, try to use privacy-focused alternatives.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the bigger picture? Like, how do we address these issues of government overreach and data exploitation on a systemic level?
Yeah, that's where things get tricky. We need stronger laws to protect our privacy.
But at the same time, we don't want to stifle innovation or limit free speech.
It's a tough balance to strike.
So what's the answer? Do we just give up and accept that our online lives are controlled by these powerful forces?
No way! We can't be passive. We have to stay informed, engaged, and vocal.
Hold our elected officials accountable. Support organizations that are fighting for digital rights.
And make our voices heard in the public sphere.
It's not going to be easy, but it's important.
Absolutely. We have a right to privacy and control over our own data.
And we have to fight for those rights.
Well said. So I think the big question now is, what does the future hold for TikTok?
Right. Is this just a temporary reprieve, or has President Trump really given them a lifeline?
And if so, what are the strings attached?
Are we going to see more government oversight of the app, more restrictions on content?
It's hard to say for sure, but I think this whole situation has really shone a light on the power dynamics at play in the digital world.
And the importance of being aware of those dynamics and fighting for a more open and equitable internet.
Yeah, we can't just sit back and let things happen. We have to be active participants in shaping the future of the digital world.
Well, this deep dive into TikTok has been a wild ride.
Yeah.
From viral dances to national security threats, from secret meetings to rumors of backroom deals.
It's been a roller coaster, and I think it's a story that's far from over.
So stay tuned, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged. The digital world is constantly evolving, and we all have a role to play in shaping its future.